Evening folks, and welcome back for another video. Now some of you keen-eyed people out there might have noticed that we've had a slight alteration to the name of the channel. Yes, it's no longer JD Woolgar 1, that's me. We just changed the name to the WTF, something that's a little bit more to the point and rolls off the tongue, as they say. But it's still going to be the same old stuff, same old radio, electronics, and with a few jet engines thrown in as well. So it'll still be at the same place, same time, and same venue here at the Woolgar test facility. Anyway, that's enough of that, just a bit of housekeeping, as they say. So tonight we're going to be talking about receivers. Now, you might have noticed that I haven't done that many videos on receivers, and the main reason is that they are probably a little bit more complicated than transmitters. Transmitters are relatively easy to build. To get a reasonably good receiver takes a little bit more time. And what we have in front of us here is a TRF receiver, which is only got 3 valves, and I made this, let me see, probably about 2 years ago. And I keep on meaning to put a video up for it and show you guys, but I just never got around to doing it. It's been sat on the desk. So we're going to have a closer look at this and show you how I built it and how it works. Just a bit of general information about TRFs. Now, if you're not familiar with receivers, or never really built anything like that, I guess if you had a spectrum of complexity in terms of receivers, you'd sort of start at the crystal set, which would be your most simple receiver, and probably after that you would have a TRF. I think that would be reasonable. And then as you get more complicated, you have sort of modifications of TRFs, things like neutrodynes, regeneradynes, all that sort of thing, until we get to sort of the more modern receiver that we know today, which is a superhet, the super heterodyne receiver. So most shortwave receivers, medium wave, or transistorized receivers, things that you use to listen to AM or medium wave, things like that, pocket radios as they were in the 70s and 80s. They're all super heterodyne receivers. Obviously these days things have evolved, and most receivers these days are digital. So if you look at your car radio, or if you buy a receiver from a high street electronics company or shop, you generally, it's all going to be digital, DAB radios, things like that. And also we've got these days SDR technology, software-defined radios, which have also come along. So, things have evolved. So we're going to go all the way back to the tuned radio receiver, which is, as I said, quite an early type of design. So just to give you a rundown as to how it basically works and what it consists of. As the title suggests, tuned radio frequency, and what that means is that a radio such as this would have an RF amplifier, a tuned RF amplifier, followed by a detector or demodulator and an audio amplifier, and that's what I've got on this radio here. And some of the more sophisticated TRFs would perhaps have maybe 1 or 2 RF stages, or RF amplification stages, then followed by a detector and then an audio amplifier. So there's not really that much to it. The pros and the cons of TRFs, well, they are quite sensitive, but they lack selectivity because of the way they're designed with a tuned RF amplifier at the front end. You don't get such good selectivity, but you generally find that the more RF stages or RF amplifier stages that you have, then you generally get improved selectivity and sensitivity. They were very popular in the 1920s, and you know, the superhet sort of came along, I would guess probably the 1930s, you know, as sort of valve technology evolved. And certainly, you know, in the war, or prior to, you know, just after the First World War, and in between, you know, prior to the Second World War, you know, a lot of households would have had something like a TRF, you know, in a big wooden cabinet, you know, good old-fashioned vintage radio. And you can still get those, you know, they're quite collectible now. So this radio here that I built, it's actually got a few features which I've put in to try and improve the selectivity of it. I built it to cover 80 meters, and we'll have a look at it in more detail, as I said. And it also covers the medium wave broadcast band, because I wanted a radio that I could, you know, have on in the shack just to listen to a bit of music while I'm sort of building stuff. And at the same time, I can switch it to 80 meters if I want to listen to the AM net on 3615, the amateur radio frequency. So that's what it does. So it covers medium wave, and it covers 80 meters. It's not terribly brilliant, but then you don't expect much for a simple design like this. And you know, it will pick up the AM stations quite easily. It struggles a bit with CW, certainly with the selectivity, and as mentioned, the coverage of the band is very on this particular radio. It's very narrow, so you know, you've only really got a very small section of the broadcast band, and similarly a very narrow section on 80 meters. So that's the way I designed it, because otherwise it tends to end up covering, you know, masses of the frequency spectrum which you don't really want to listen to. So anyway, that's more or less what TRF is and how it works. So what I'll do is I'll sort of show you a couple of circuits that I used to build this, and give you an idea of, you know, how it was made. My TRF is loosely based on the Powerset design. Now, for those that are not familiar with the Powerset, this was a transceiver that was used during World War II. It was a spy radio. It had 3 valves, 6V6 in the PA, and a pair of 6 SK7s. The 16S SK7 was a detector or oscillator, you know, part of the regenerative stage, and then the other one was an audio amp. And that it's quite a basic TRF design, and I've essentially used that configuration, but I've changed some of the valves. So, for instance, I've got a pair of EF91s or CV4014s, and the audio stage is actually an ECL80, the pentode section of an ECL80 to provide the audio, because I wanted to run it off run a speaker off it. And that's more or less what I've actually done. I'm just going to show you some of the other aspects of the circuit which I've actually incorporated, a couple of things to try and improve the fine tuning, which I think does help with you know, with a TRF. So let's have a quick look at that. So if we look at the RF and the detector stages of the TRF that I made, you'll get a rough idea of the changes that I made to try and improve the selectivity of the receiver. Now, this circuit diagram I got off the internet, and now I can't remember, because it was quite a while ago, the person who put this up on the internet. I think it was an Australian chap, because it was an Australian amateur call sign, a VK. So if you are out there, many thanks for putting this up and the circuit diagram. Couldn't find the original article I got this, despite many hours trawling the net. So I'm not sure whether this circuit is still up there. But anyway, this is what I downloaded at the time, and you can see there that we've got the RF amplifier. And again, I'm not using a 6SJ7. I've got an EF91, but it's just a very similar circuit. But you'll notice that in the regeneration coil circuitry, in other words, the grid circuit of the detector, you've got a 1500 puff capacitor and you've got a reverse biased LED. Okay, so the reversed biased LED, the purpose of that is that LEDs have a certain amount of capacitance which varies depending on the voltage across them. And a bit like a vari-cap, which you can use to just alter the capacitance of the input tuned circuit ever so slightly, and that gives you a little bit more fine tuning, so to speak. That reverse bias voltage on that LED is actually controlled by another circuit, which we will take a quick look at. The reverse bias voltage on that LED is essentially controlled by this circuit here, which is all based around an MPY634, which is a chip that I don't know much about. I will have to admit that. It's a voltage multiplier, voltage controller chip used for things like modulation, demodulation, etc., etc. It's a bit of a mystery chip, but this is the chip that this particular amateur used to control that reverse bias voltage. And without going into too much detail, because I actually found it difficult to get my head around this, how it actually works, but it's basically dependent on the you've got two rails there, plus 15, minus 15. You've got a number of trimming pots, which sort of sets the limit of the voltage, which is equivalent to your frequency range. And then you've got a variable, you've got a 10 turn 5k pot there, VR1, which you twiddle, and you obviously vary the voltage input into the MPY634, and that then goes to an op-amp, a TL072, which is a straightforward op-amp. And the output of that op-amp then controls the reverse bias on the LED. Does it work? To a degree, it works. It does give you a little bit of fine tuning, but it's when you consider that the TRF is really not, from a selectivity point of view, it's not great anyway. This is it's like putting an elastic band propeller on the 747 and hoping that it will provide more thrust. It helps. It might help a little bit, but it's only just noticeable. So there you go. So what we'll have a look. What we'll do is I'll give you a demo of this TRF. We'll have a quick look at it in more detail. On the top and on the bottom, and then we'll fire it up, and you can see how it works. Right. So here it is, the homebrew TRF, and just to go over a few small things on the outside of it. So we've got our three valves, CV4014 or EF91, both there, and then the audio valve, which is an ECL82, well, the pentode section of it. Nice mains transformer there with a protective cover. You don't want to get electric shock. And then the control knobs in the front here, we've got the mains, obviously. This is the main tuning or coarse tuning. and then we've got the band switch, which goes from 80 meters to the broadcast band or medium wave, and fine tuning, volume, and that controls the regeneration. One of the things I do like about TRFs is that when you play around with them, you have to keep adjusting them, and you always get lots of whistles and buzzes and things like that with them, which you don't get with an SDR receiver. So they are actually quite fun to use. Let's have a quick look at the undersurface of this, because there are a few things of note which are quite handy to know if you're planning to build something like this. So this is the underside of the TRF, and it's essentially built along the standard, principles of valves or tubes, where you do point-to-point wiring, lots of tag strips, tag boards, except for the fine-tuning control, which uses that integrated circuit, MPY634. But the rest of it is, pretty standard construction that you would use in any piece of valve equipment. Just a couple of things to draw your attention to. The first thing is that this is obviously the coil for the the detector, and what you'll notice here is that, well, this one is actually the one for the medium wave band, and you can see that I've it's obviously a lot bigger than the one we've got for 80 meters. But what I've used here is what they call Litz wire, and Litz wire is basically a very fine multi-stranded copper wire, which is sort of, well, the original Litz wire used to be insulated with layers of silk, and this is actually a sort of a modern equivalent, but I'm not sure if they use silk. It's sort of like, when you actually unravel it, it's like I suppose the nearest description is sort of fiberglass cotton wool or something like that. But anyway, the reason why you use Litz wire in these receivers is that it's high Q, which is what you need for on your receiver coils. So if possible, if you are building a TRF or planning to see if you can get hold of Litz wire, Litz, you can get it off eBay, and there's a few sellers that still sell it, but it's pretty useful stuff for receivers. What else? Not much really. The rest of it's quite standard. We've got power supplies, bridge rectifiers there. So we have cheated a little bit here. We have used some solid state components in the power supply. If you wanted to, be really authentic, you'd probably use a vacuum tube rectifier, if you wanted to do that. But this was quite a short, quick and easy project, so hence the reason for using some of the semiconductors. And as I mentioned, that's the fine tuning. Down here we've got the output transformer and a small little speaker there. I think that's a 5 watt or a 3 watt speaker, which came from RS or Farnell, one of them. So the speaker's quite modern, and most of the other components are. So that's it really. I guess we need to fire it up and see what it sounds like. Right, okay, we've got it turned on. I think I've got it tuned into Radio 5 Live at the moment. There's quite a bit of fading, so it does tend to come and go. I have to be ever so careful with this, because if I tune into a music station, which there are quite a lot of powerful broadcast stations, I think some local ones around here, and if we start tuning into music stations, I'll probably get a copyright strike off YouTube, so we'll have to be a bit careful. But anyway, Radio 5 Live is... Let's just see if we can get it. There's lots of continental stations coming in. I've got this connected up to my 80 meter dipole, so it is quite a big aerial. one of the things you have to be careful with these is that they can get overloaded quite quickly.
After this type of performance, where you created many chances to score, and the opportunity to win the game.
So I think you can hear that that's 5 Live. There's some obviously some foreign footballer giving his opinion on a recent soccer game. We've got the regen there. Regeneration's quite sensitive on this. So if you turn it all the way down, you don't get anything at all. And you can... It's almost like an extra volume control. That's actually the volume. So that turns it all the way off. We'll just use the fine tuning.
The decision that the referee took. Otherwise, I can tell that.
But it, you know, it's quite usable as a little radio you can have on the workbench, you know, while you're doing something else. So I'm quite pleased with this. Actually, quite pleased how it came out. But what I would like to do is demonstrate how it works on 80 meters. Now, let's just turn it to 80 meters. I think we've got some broadcast stations coming through now. I have to just play around with the tuning. So that sounds like PSK 31. And there's also some CW as well coming through. And you can also hear sideband, single sideband. You won't be able to resolve single sideband with this because obviously it doesn't have a local oscillator. Well, sometimes you can resolve it with a TRF if you can get the oscillator. You know, obviously the detecting valve, and which also doubles up as an oscillator when you adjust the regen. If you get it just at the right point, you can actually resolve SSB, but it's not easy to do. And obviously we're at what time is it now? It's 7:20. You know, the band is obviously very alive at the moment because it's, you know, it's in the winter. You know, it's dark, so it's going to be quite tricky to resolve stations. I think what we're going to do is I'll turn it off. I think we must try again in the morning and see how it works on the AM net. And we'll give you a quick demonstration, you know, of it receiving, you know, amateur radio transmissions, which is one of the reasons why, you know, we've got the 80 meter option there. Martin G3YJO on the AM net this morning. The band's still very noisy even at this time of the day. But I think that gives you more or less a good demonstration of this TRF on AM. I think conditions not ideal, but you know, you can just about make out Martin there, G3YJO, and yeah, I think with a bit more filtering or something like that could probably improve it a bit more. But yeah, it's not that bad little radio. Anyway, thanks for watching and hope to catch you again soon.